Good evening, everyone. Pearse Sullivan, Supervision Manager in RCU. I'm going to talk to you a bit about what we did in supervision in 2017 and also what we might look at in 2018. We'll have questions and answers after Bill, so I'll gladly speak to all of you, or any of you. And indeed, we'll have tea and coffee after, so if anyone wants to speak to me on a one-on-one basis about any supervisory matters, I'll be delighted to talk to you. So, right. There's 273 active credit unions since in September 2017. At the bald figure there of 146 PRISM engagements will tell you that we're reaching a large reach within the sector. That figure itself, though, only tells half the story. Some of the engagements may be 2 or 3 days long, but notably some engagements have gone on to up to 2 weeks on site. So you can imagine, in larger credit unions that tends to happen. So there's a large variety and diversity in what we're doing when we are on site. But as you can see, it's 146, as a lot of you will have had the pleasure of a PRISM visit this year, and a lot of you can expect it again next year. It's actually down on the previous year, it was 165, but we're going for more depth, more breadth now in our engagements. We're trying to get more out of it, so that we're going to get value for ourselves and value very much for yourselves as well. There was another couple of different areas that we got involved with too on the supervisory front. We had asset and governance reviews. We had 18 asset reviews. We had 12 governance reviews. They were carried on by third parties, again. And then we had a number of TMatic assessments. We had 5 this year. We had 2 in 2016. We had F&P and outsourcing. We had 5 this year, and I'll return to them in a couple of slides. On top of that, then, we had meetings such as this one, indeed, and then meetings with the representative bodies and NSF and the like. So what did all this show up? Up to the end of October, we had 140 of the 146 we're meant to do. So we've the back broken on our engagements this year. The RFPs that we've issued are 589 in total. As you can see from there, there's a couple of surprising things to me now when I seen the figures at first. And one is the large amount of governance RFPs that issued. The second one that struck me was the small amount of credit RFPs that issued, considering, as you will all know, that we spend a lot of our time looking at credit when we are indeed on site. So I drilled down to the figures a bit myself after that. Governance is kind of such a wide area, it's such an important area, and it's such an area of focus for ourselves. It's inevitable that's going to throw out a lot of RFPs. But on the credit side, I said, why is there so few? And really, because it comes down to 2 things. There's policy and there's underwriting. 2 of them is where the areas where the RFPs were. So you tend to have sort of more all-encompassing RFPs in credit. You tend to have them more involved and maybe even multifaceted, multi-stage, and they count as one RFP. But in the governance area, it's such a wide-ranging area. You may have something in IA, you may have something in risk, you may have something in compliance. So there'd be 3, where you may have one credit RFP that'd be twice its length. So that's where the figures that came up to. But they were notable for the fact that there were so many governance RFPs issued, and that's something that we'll exercise ourselves, and we'll probably colour our thinking for 2018, and we'll talk again on that. Now, as ever, we're encouraged by the amount of good credit unions that are running out there, that they're modernising, they're proactive. The boards, the executives, the volunteers all have a clear idea on their roles and responsibilities. They have a good idea on business models and the challenges that they're faced, and they're taking them on. As I said, it's always great to engage with those credit unions, and we're always proactive. And as I said, it's obviously a great encouragement to ourselves because we see the sector working so well in certain parts. However, there's a couple that will be a significant cohort that will be lagging behind. And if you look at there, we have kind of 4 headline issues there. The ineffective risk and compliance. You have internal audit that's not adding value. It's not supporting lending decisions, not supporting decisions that are being made by the board. And there's poor oversight of this activities by the boards. They're not getting the value they can. And I touched on this last year when we spoke about outsourcing. You're not getting the value you should be getting from your outsourced activities. From your risk and compliance too, some of that's in-house. They're not getting the necessary training, they're not getting the necessary support. We want to see boards engaging more with the risk and compliance people. We want to see the boards questioning and tackling the internal audit more. That way, you will get better defence. You get better defence for yourselves. It's the 3-line defence: IA, risk and compliance. You get the value for your members' funds and what you engage in there. But also, as I said, when it's in-house, there needs to be more training, needs to be more support to the staff that are there. The lack of business model understanding, really what we're talking about there is that, you're looking to expand the services, and that's something we'll absolutely support, as the previous speakers have touched upon. But there's an underpinning supports that have to be in play. If you're going into longer term lending, you have to have different risk ALM, asset and liability management. you have different type of underwriting, all this sort of stuff. Not always we're seeing the dots being joined up regarding that kind of chain moving. It's similar to with the online presentation. You're moving to an online presentation, that's fine, an online suite of services. There's a lot, and we mentioned there about cyber risk. You also mentioned about the actual costs of updating the technology that's there. There are things that have to be thought through and really worked out. And it's something that, again, we're encouraged because a number of credit unions are doing it. A good number of credit unions are doing it. So there's no reason why the rest can't. I mentioned TMatic Focus. This year we had 5 different TMatic Focuses, TMatic inspection series. They're in various stages of completion. Some are very close, some are not. As you start there with the transfer engagement integration, what we were looking at on this, and still a couple on sites to go on this, so I can't draw any kind of conclusions of this. It would be previous of me to do so. We're looking at sort of strategic thinking, and we're looking at the financial. And what we're doing there is we're looking at marrying up the detailed business case and the projections that came in beforehand, and how are they performing now. Now, there's a year, 2, 3 years down the line of some of these into larger entities, we're seeing are they bearing fruit. It's not an easy exercise because, obviously a lot of loan books are ticking up, so you're kind of looking at things in different situations. But we're looking too at the governance. How is everything taken on board? Is it a proper assimilation? You've crossed the branches, if you've branch network, or the IT network, all that kind of been done to support the new larger entity. Bank and cash controls, again, that's ongoing. There's still a number of on-sites to go there, so I wouldn't dare go into what we're finding there at this point because it's not quite final. But obviously bank reconciliations, cash controls, we're doing walkthroughs in cash, we're doing all that kind of stuff. And really that's the key pillar of internal operational risk. It's something we want to see again. And again, we're varying results there at the moment, but again, some of it would be encouraged on. The member prize draw was interesting because for the first time, that was a thematic we did that was actually standalone. And there was 33 credit unions were visited for that, so a number of you would be pleased to have got a PRISM visit and a members draw visit. They went out, they sent out a survey first to all the sector, and all the sector replied, and we're very thankful for that, and it shows again the cooperation we get from yourselves. 33, as I said, were visited. Now, the report is very close to being finished. There's some interesting figures in it. There's reasonably, but what I would say that sometimes they lack clear policies and procedures, and also to the oversight on them. Another thing that was interesting that came out of it too, which again it mirrors back what we had again in our thematics in 2016, is there's not a clear correlation between size and quality. Some of the smaller credit unions are doing a very good tight job and running a tight ship, and some of the larger ones may be a bit lax in the controls, or maybe losing that a bit. The fourth one there we're talking about is it's called mortgages, we call it house loans. This is very close to being complete. We'd hope to have the report out by the end of this year. There's a number of issues there you can see yourself. The inadequate underwriting for loans. Clearly this is a different type of loan type. I'm not 100% sure that's been kind of identified by certain credit unions. That's because, as I said, I mentioned that the pricing is obviously vital to this, which is a product that could go out, stretch out for a window of 20 to 25 years. You have to have your pricing right. We've seen a couple of instances where this was really just seemed to be a random figure that was kind of based on between our secured and between our unsecured. It was one thing. And then another thing there is the lack of detailed house policy. What we would like to see in supervision when you're going undertaking such a big undertaking as mortgages, we'd like to see a dedicated lending policy that's involving house loans. Not just a couple of paragraphs or a section that's added onto your existing lending policy, because there's so much to do in underwriting, so much to do in the risk and the management, and so much to do in the processes and procedures that have to be changed, that it does warrant its own standalone policy. So we'd like to see you moving towards that. And again, a number of credit unions do that and do it successfully, but a large number don't. Finally, we've IT risk management. I believe that's very close to being imminent. What we looked at there was outsourcing. We looked at data recovery and seeing how we were working. I know that they engaged with about 12 to 13 credit unions on that. And I know they spoke to the IT providers as well. And I believe what's coming out of that will be quite interesting. But as I said, I hope to have that by the year end. So on to 18. What are we going to do here? All right, there'll be further thematic inspections. There won't be a series of 5. There'll be custom engagements as necessary. The custom engagement, what we talk about there, is reacting to events that happen in the sector or something that happens. We have to maintain flexible for ourselves on that. And they're going to be calibrated on a different basis, and that is really on asset size proportionality. What's that saying? The bigger you are, the more likely you're going to see us. And then on the individual risk profile, we have to break down in 3 areas that we believe gives a good indication on viability. The first one, of course, is governance and compliance. That reflects on the culture of the credit union. Credit and operational reflects on the execution within the credit union. And finally, strategy and business model, which looks at the outlook and the thinking within the credit union. And they're the areas that we'll be feeding into what we will look at our viability to come along and see on who we decide to visit next. So with that, as I said, I'll just talk about finally about the headwinds. We're all aware that Brexit's coming down the line. I think we can't deny it's going to happen. We're also all aware that we're very uncertain of what's going to happen there. So what can a credit union do about it? Well, in the Intertrade survey that came out recently showed 95% of SMEs are not actively planning for Brexit. Now, that's a very interesting what to say about actively planning. But you have micro instances, like you will have, say, large-scale employers in your own area that has sell into the UK market. They could move and look at moving operations over to the UK because to take post-Brexit. There's something like obviously agri-tourism. Different parts of the country would say Trump is more important than Brexit. That depends on how many American visitors they get. But others then will say that the tourism is affected and the agri. So there's a danger there. Another thing. So what are we expecting the credit unions to do? Well, you have to be aware of it. The risk function, your risk management function is key on this particular area. It has to be able to identify it. It goes into your risk register. It goes suggested the mitigants. It reports up to the board deciding the course of action they're taking, and then really beyond that, you can't do an awful lot because the contingency planning on this is very wide on the range of what could happen. We don't know if it's a hard or soft Brexit, but it's just something that will be occupying your risk management. We expected our risk management to be doing a lot of this in 2018, and certainly I'd expect that we'll be looking at it and see how you're getting on. Thanks for listening, folks. I'll pass you on to Bill Hobbs now, who's going to speak to you about business model. Thank you.